everyone has a chance to ask questions. If you will, put your question and your email address in the chat so that Ashley has allowed a little time at the end so we can discuss questions. But that way, if your email is accompanies your question, if we should run out of time, she or I can respond to you afterward or tomorrow if it's a matter of looking something up for you. So let's get started. It is 6 o'clock. Welcome to this April Going Green lecture presented by the Woodlands Green. It's my pleasure to be your host tonight. I want you to realize what a special event this is for us to make it a 2-hour Going Green lecture, but this was too good an opportunity to miss. Our presenter tonight is Ashley Morgan Olvera. She's the Director of Research and Education for Texas Invasive Species Institute at Sam Houston State University and for the TexasInvasives.org program. Apparently, her training in parasitology well prepared her to manage and prevent invasive species. So, what she has to tell us is very important for our knowledge and the health of our local environment, especially our native plants. So, I hope you'll enjoy tonight's presentation. Put your questions in if you wish, and be sure to put in your email address. And thank you so much for joining us. Ashley, why don't you tell us what you have to say tonight?
All right. Thank you, Terry. Thank y'all for having me and spending a couple hours with me on a Thursday evening to talk about invasive species. So, as she mentioned, I am with the Texas Invasive Species Institute. And there we go. I was like, it was antsy before. Why isn't it going now? So, at the Texas Invasive Species Institute, we focus on early detection and rapid response to newly invasive pests and enhance public education. So, we're always willing to talk about what species are out there, how you can prevent them, how you can remove them, because the more educated the public is, the more they can make better decisions on what they're bringing into the yard, how to remove things, and then also report things, because the quicker we respond to something, as you'll see, the better chance we have of actually being able to do something about it. So we're willing to talk to audiences of all ages. And as Terry also mentioned, we now run the TexasInvasives.org program as well. So that has been made possible through many partners, including USDA APHIS, which is the invasive species branch of the USDA, Sam Houston State University, where we're housed, Texas A&M Forest Service, and the U.S. Forest Service, and especially Texas Parks and Wildlife. So basically what this means is if you Google Texas and invasives, you will find us. You will find our website. So the tsusinvasives.org website here on the right, that is the TISI website. And then texasinvasives.org is the original texasinvasives.org website. We always operated as sister entities. Now we're your one-stop shop. TexasInvasives.org, that is the website where we do reporting. So a lot of these sentinel pests and pests that require reporting, I'm talking about on this platform, but both of them offer invasive species databases because keeping this information updated and available to the public is the best way to keep the public informed as well. So we have illustrated descriptions. We talk about distribution and habitat, how these species spread, how they've been introduced, how you can manage them, if there are any natives that look like them. So please know that anything that I'm talking to you about today can be found on our website. Nothing I'm sharing is state secrets. We want people to know about this and what is an invasive species. So I always like to start at the beginning so that we all have kind of the same understanding of what an invasive species is, because weed or exotic or ornamental sometimes get interchanged with invasive, and that's not necessarily the case. So in 1999, under President Bill Clinton, there was an executive order that we finally got a federal definition for invasive species. So once there's a federal definition, then you can think about, well, now there's a lot of funding and stuff behind that. So that's only been 26 years. So it's a species that is non-native to the ecosystem under consideration and whose introduction causes or is likely to cause economic or environmental harm or harm to human, animal, and plant health. You see, there's been some revisions to this. It was amended in 2016 to remove the term alien, and then it added animal and plant health. So that section, I have it red, bolded, and underlined because that is the defining part of an invasive species. It causes harm, more harm than good. So sometimes that harm can be something like we would normally think of, some harm to human health, right? Something that directly impacts us, like the Asian tiger mosquito that can spread a lot of diseases. But also there's harm to industry, the economy, right? That all the federal funding and things like that that have to go to just the management of invasive species, how it can impact our agriculture, our food sources, our forestry, natural heritage, recreation. Those are a lot of ways that invasive species can have their impact. Sometimes the impact is very obvious, like with the emerald ash borer. This one is the same street in Ohio, 3 years apart, lined with ash trees before the beetle and then after the beetle. So sometimes the damage is obvious, right? And billions of ash trees have been destroyed because of this invasive beetle. And it is seen, especially I've gone to Green Bay a couple of times, and when you're doing that drive, honestly, once you even get into like the Kansas area, but driving up through Illinois and into Wisconsin, it's in the middle of summer, and you'll see a ton of dead trees or trees without leaves, right? And those are the ash trees that have been decimated. So sometimes, they might impact one facet. So the emerald ash borer impacts our forestry and our economy, but I like to use the invasive red imported fire ant as an example of this because of how it can impact in many different ways. It has harm in the ecological sense where it attacks native ground dwelling animals, it harms soil arthropod community, and it displaces native ants. So there was a native fire ant that wasn't as bad, that kept everything kind of in control. The fire ant has decimated that. Ground dwelling animals, things like the Texas horned lizard and bobwhite quail populations they do drop when fire ants enter the area. They've also been known to destroy hundreds of acres of crops because they are omnivores. So they will destroy corn, soybean, blueberry, cabbage. And our state alone pays $500 million dollars a year just to manage the damage that fire ant causes to livestock, wildlife, and public health. And that's because you can also be allergic to fire ant bites, just like you can be allergic to bee stings. So fire ant bites can cause an exaggerated reaction or even anaphylactic shock. And this reaction can happen in humans, pets, and livestock. So why do we battle invasive species? Because of their definition, right? They're harmful. The reason we have such a hard time controlling them is also what the common name suggests, the invasive part. If a species just stayed in place and we could trap it in a jar and remove it, oh, brilliant. The problem is that invasive species spread, and they're usually very good at spreading, whether it's they produce more eggs, they reproduce earlier. Maybe they have more cycles. Maybe they produce hundreds of thousands of seeds that are drought tolerant, that are flood tolerant, there are so many barriers that they're able to overcome. One of the examples that I like to use, an infamous example as far as I'm concerned, of how if we do nothing, right? Doing nothing is not the answer, but also this invasive species shows how quickly they can spread. So the red imported lionfish, this is a lionfish that's very popular in the aquarium trade. You can still buy it today. So it's important to know invasive does not mean illegal. So I cannot stop you from buying a red lionfish today. I strongly discourage it. And maybe this will help you decide otherwise. And then if you ever meet anybody that's talking about a lionfish, you can talk them out of it. I've done that a few times as well. So in 1985, there was an aquarium in Miami. There was a hurricane in Miami that caused the aquarium to flood. None of that is really out of the ordinary, right? We're in Southeast Texas. We are used to those kinds of things can happen. So a pair of lionfish, a breeding pair, a male and a female, escaped. It was the 80s. What were they going to do, right? This is also 14 years before federal definition. So scientists were probably aware of invasive species and trying to course correct some things, but did other levels care? So nothing was done. And the first 12 years, their populations didn't seem to explode. But the thing about the red lionfish is that it has parapolitic venom in its spines. So there's going to be certain predators that are vulnerable to this. This can paralyze and kill humans. It can harm sharks and other larger fish as well. And there are predators in Southeast Asia that are adapted for this, but not for the lionfish. So nothing was done about the lionfish breeding off of the coast of Florida. And since nothing was done, their populations were able to explode to where now they're found from Philadelphia down to Venezuela, all throughout the Caribbean, and also impacting the second largest coral reef in the world off the coast of Belize. So it is throughout the Gulf of Mexico. You can look at poor Florida here, but it is also in the Texas Ocean, the portion of the Gulf of Mexico. And there's also a secondary impact. So this lionfish is causing major disruption because it has no predators, and it also has a very significant appetite. So it's able to eat anything smaller than itself. So it's having a direct impact on food webs, but then also this secondary impact because coral reefs are now dying because lionfish are eating the fish that maintain coral reefs. And so now there's this huge secondary impact that's causing a lot of harm. And again, this is still a legally sold animal at this point. So, how do invasive species spread? The previous example kind of gave a hint, but if you think about it, there's a lot of ways that plants and animals spread. Sometimes the seeds can catch wind, they stick to your clothes, they're carried by birds. Birds can fly, insects can fly, or some can. And then, many mammals and heck, even plants can migrate multiple feet a day, right? So there's a lot of ways that animals and plants are moving, but the main factor and what usually causes the largest, most significant jump is that human assistance, right? We have been exporting and importing goods ever since Marco Polo went over to the Khan Empire. So what was that, like the 1300s or even older than that? So at least 700 years humans have been moving goods across wide, vastly different ecosystems. So that's how a lot of it has spread, is a lot of accidental introduction. So through produce, plants being introduced, emerald ash borers arrived on shipping pallets because they burrow in wood for several months and then emerge as adults. We'll talk about them. Apple snails were used as pets. Zebra mussels came across as ballast water. Cargo ships draw up water at one port, they get to the next one, they let out water at the port they arrive at. And so that allows invisible larvae like zebra mussels to travel thousands of miles. And then there's a lot of purposeful, intentional. The main culprits of this are the nursery industry and the pet industry. So a lot of exotic pets, right? We've heard of python problems in Florida. Well, we've got apple snails here in Texas. And then also you've got to worry about things like the tegu and other frogs. And then intentional introductions that were used as biological controls, but they were introduced too early. So there was a lot of, oh no, we have a problem with this. Let's bring in a predator from its area and that'll balance it out. But the problem is the predator will eat more than just its normal diet. And so there were a lot of bad mistakes happening. Like in Australia, they have issues with cane toads, which are toads that have a hallucinogenic secretion on their back of their skin that can cause issues in many mammals. And with Australia having unique marsupials, introducing a toad that could do that was probably not the best idea. So there's been a lot of purposeful and accidental introduction. And the reason that the landscaping industry has been one of the major culprits and still is to this day, because if you look at the list of plants that we have on our websites and then you look at what's for sale at the nursery, you're going to realize, wow, it is hard to make a good decision if you are not aware of what invasive plants are. So I don't have a green thumb personally. I really don't. I look for things that are easy to propagate, lots of seeds. Seeds last for a long time. It produces just fine on its own. It's easy to care for, as in I don't water it except for the rain does. It doesn't have problems with bugs. It can be planted anywhere. And then it's always nice if it has flowers. Again, that doesn't require much attention. The problem with that is those are usually characteristics of invasive plants, and we'll give a few examples of that, but definitely think about the easy to propagate aspect. So you're going to hear contradictions. You're going to see contradictions. We'll tell you, please don't buy ligustrum. Please don't plant it. Please remove it. And then you'll see that it can still be for sale and that you can go and buy privet, as it's commonly known, from many nurseries. Technically, they are sterile varieties, but it's one of those, why not just buy a different kind of plant? So there is a lot of action that's being done, regulation. So because there's a lot of accidental introduction through importation and exportation, that's why you have customs. That's why they have all of these um, scans that are supposed to happen when goods come into the country. It's not just, they're not just looking for drugs. They're also making sure that things like invasive insects or invasive snails that are prohibited pets are not being smuggled into the country. So we're also doing a lot of control and management on the research side, monitoring and figuring out how to restore lands after invasive species have come through. There is a lot more public awareness about this, and this is something that we support through Texas Parks and Wildlife and for Texas Parks and Wildlife, especially the Protect the Lakes You Love, their Clean, Drain, and Dry campaign, and the Don't Let Your Pets Become Pests. So never dump your aquarium. So the invasive species requires vigilance and treatment and management and monitoring, and us field scientists and research biologists and these control strategists, everybody, they are only making up one half of the picture. All these federal and state entities that are helping trying to fight this battle, the other half of the picture are engaged citizens like yourself that are doing what they can on a local level, even if it's in your own yard. Managing what is in your area is so important. And then if one of you goes and talks to another person, I've already doubled my audience. So just spreading that awareness and education to everybody as well. So what can you do? You're already here. You're taking one of the first steps. That's listening to me talk about invasive species and other things that you can do. So please remember, we always have our websites available for invasive databases. So you can look up more information about the pests. There's also the Quiet Invasion. It's a booklet that is offered through Hark, but they also have a digital version of it as well at galvbayinvasives.org. The HTML is, sorry, keep clicking, is listed right here. It's also a great resource for invasive species in the area. And you can always stay informed with us at, here, I'll go ahead and minimize that. You can stay informed with us and learn more about invasive species on a monthly basis. We do provide a digital eye wire that comes to the your email every month, and it talks about important updates, invasive species spotlights, and it does cover news from Texas and beyond. So there is actually sometimes good news about biocontrols or certain things that are happening against invasive species. And like we have here, we love to feature citizen scientist groups that are removing invasive species, like the Invasives Task Force in your area. So, how do you stop species from spreading? Please prevent dispersal. Do not give them a free ride. Think about what you're doing in your daily habits, your recreational habits, all of those kinds of things to clean, drain, and dry. Never dump your aquarium. Please know it is the law to clean, drain, and dry your boat because the spread of so many invasive species has been directly linked to improperly cleaned boats, things like giant salvinia, hydrilla, alodia, zebra mussels, quagga mussels, Asian clams. I mean, there's a ton of aquatic life that has been spread, and it usually just takes one fragment of plant or one larva. And then again, with pests, become pets become pests. Invasive does not mean prohibited to sell. So please don't ever let it loose. Do not dump your aquarium. Do not let them out into the wild. These kinds of releases have been related to the spread of lionfish. So if they had not been in an aquarium that had been flooded, right, then we wouldn't have this issue. Also, apple snails, their spread has been linked to aquarium dumps. Apple snails were very popular in the aquarium trade. Thankfully, this is a prohibited species in Texas. Brown animals, you might have noticed the lizards in your yard have changed color and maybe they look a little different. That's because it's actually an invasive species taking over. Green iguanas have caused so much issue, especially for Puerto Rico and a lot of islands where they're not native to, and the Burmese python, and it's huge issues in the Florida Everglades and southeastern United States. Don't move firewood. That's something very important to burn it where you b- buy it. So if you're going to a state park, please buy your firewood locally, whether it's at the park itself or the corner store near the park. We don't need to be transporting firewood across multiple county lines. That's because there are a lot of critters that live inside the wood. And that is how you can be giving things a free ride because you may not know how that tree met its demise, and it could have been because of beetles. But again, there are just so many species, native and invasive. So it's really important to not move firewood. We do want you to check your plants. That's how a lot of invasive invertebrates are able to spread. So people will notice hammerhead flatworms after they've brought something new home, or maybe their neighbor mulched, or they've noticed the earthworms look a little different in the plants that they're bringing home. So just please check new plants for anything invasive, anything that looks weird, right? And act accordingly. So please do not buy invasive plants. Please plant natives. There are so many out there that are still widely for sale. Heavenly bamboo, privets, golden bamboo, elephant ears, mimosa tree, tree of heaven, honeysuckles. There are a lot out there, and that's just a few. So, how do we stop them from spreading? It's also we've got to find things as quickly as they arrive, and that leads into our Sentinel Pest Network. So, our Sentinel Pest Network species and how to report them. Our Sentinel network, these are species that are of high concern, high regulatory significance. They're basically our big bads. And we want anybody to report to us at any time. So this has been made available on our website. The Sentinel Pest Network, it started as a dirty dozen and it's quickly spread to more than a dozen. It's around 26 animals and plants at this time, and then one parasite and disease. The list is spread to something like this, including things like apple snails, emerald ash borer, giant salvinia, zebra mussels, yellow floating heart, red bay ambrosia beetle, and citrus greening. So the column here on the right with all of the red, Those are marking that, yes, it is currently here in Texas. You may be thinking, well, then why bother? Drop it off the list. Well, just because it made it to the state doesn't mean that we do not care. We want to see how quickly it's spreading. And again, y'all are able to help provide that vigilance for us. I'm only one set of eyes. There's 16 of us on here. So that's another, 16 sets of eyes that can help look and report these kinds of species. And so, even though many of them are here in Texas, we do want to see if they're spreading. Sometimes it could be related to a flooding event or maybe other jumps that are allowing these organisms to expand. So if you go to texasinvasives.org, the species that I'm talking about that are sentinel pests, this list of species right here is right here on our homepage. We want to make it easy for anybody so you can click left or right to scroll the species that you're trying to report. Does not require a login. You don't need to be a citizen scientist for this. You're able to report directly from the website. If you don't like scrolling left to right, you can always go to the Take Action tab, click Report It, and then you can scroll up and down to view the animals and organisms that are on there. So the first species that we're going to talk about today, well, besides the one that we've already talked about, the few that we've introduced, is the giant apple snail. So this is a sentinel pest that we do want you to report to us. So scientific name is Pumacia maculata. It is a freshwater ampullarid snail. So this is a snail you will only find, the adults are fully freshwater, so they will be found in creeks and ditches and bayous. They tend to like more slower moving water, and it's native to Brazil, Paraguay, and Argentina. So it was used in the aquarium trade, and its spread is linked to aquarium dumps in Florida. It is a large snail, so that's why it was used in this. It's pretty cool to look at if you think about it, but unfortunately, it is spread throughout 10 watersheds in Texas, and it was first reported in our state 25 years ago in 2000. So here in this map, the larger and darker the blue dot, the more sightings that have been reported for the area. So you can see San Antonio has a significant infestation that's actually along the Riverwalk. And then Houston, most of those 10 watersheds are in the Houston area, unfortunately. The Woodlands, right where y'all are, is the very northern border of that. So we have found some reportings from like 45 and 242, but we keep looking to see how they popped up there. Were they in any other waterways or was it a flooding event? So it is important that we do want to get any reports about these species. There are two invasive snails on our list. The first one is the giant African land snail. So this one is not established in Texas. This is a federally prohibited snail. So this is not allowed in any port, and it is still in other countries, it is still widely popular in the pet trade. As you can see by the size of it here, it is giant. It is a very large snail, but it has a conical shell, that kind of ice cream cone like shell. And so that's going to be an important way to tell the apple snail from other types of snails. The apple snails have that spiral flat shell. Apple snails are established in Texas. They've been found in Bexar, Guadalupe, Fort Bend, Harris, Montgomery, and Tarrant counties. So there are some populations up in Fort Worth. It is a fully aquatic snail, while the giant African land snail is a terrestrial snail. And then apple snails have one unique identifying characteristic that this sign will always tell you that there is an apple snail present and there's an infestation present, and it is these bright pink eggs. So apple snails are, while the adults are fully aquatic, they're eggs have to be fully arid, so fully exposed to the air. So you will notice eggs laid on maybe neighboring posts, concrete culverts, trees that are near the water, grass that's near the water, anything near the water or in the water that isn't the water is where these eggs will be laid. And it is a bright pink. I have not used a filter. That is the color of the eggs. So bright pink bubble gum. If you see eggs like this, we strongly encourage you, please, to smash them. The reason we want to do that is that it is very hard to eradicate the adults. That's because they are very good burrowers. So, being fully aquatic, they're always submerged. They're often submerged in murkier waters like bayous, ditches, culverts, things like that. And if we apply molluscicides, so chemicals to kill mollusks, they will burrow deeper into the dirt and they'll actually survive. So, unless you're able to fully like excavate and scrounge up all the sludge at the bottom of a water area, it's very hard to get rid of the adults, but the eggs are very obvious. And so that is a quick way to control population sizes. And so easiest way to confirm infestation. The apple snail, the reason that it's invasive is it does have an ecological impact because it does have a larger appetite. It is a larger snail than our native aquatic snails. So it can disrupt the plant vegetation in areas, but also it is known to transmit parasites that are harmful to rats and our pets and ourselves. So other mammals are susceptible. It is fatal in rats, but it it causes some issues in us. So it's really important that we don't handle these snails with bare hands. We'll talk about some prevention when I discuss another pest. But this is its main reason for being called invasive, is it's able to spread parasites across many mammals. So again, we have done signage with Parks and Wildlife and the Dallas Zoo to where we strongly encourage you that if you see eggs, squish them. You might have even seen this signage in the Woodlands area because they've been very good about putting these signs up throughout areas where they could be found. So there is a native species that often gets reported to us, and I honestly I would rather have 1,000 wrong reports than a missed identification. So please always report if you're not sure what you're looking at. Is the rosy wolf snail. In our area of Texas, it's considered native, but it is a predatory snail. So if you're ever noticing, I don't know, some sort of imbalance, maybe you like the brown garden snails in your yard. Maybe they provide a good balance, and then this guy comes in here and suddenly your plants are shriveling, or I don't know. But if you're noticing an imbalance, please feel free to remove this, right? Natives can be pests as well, but the main difference between these two species, it comes down to size and coloration. So the giant African land snail can be 3 to 8 inches, usually more around 5 to 8 inches. So it is a significantly large snail, but rosy wolf snails are no punks either. They get up to 4 inches long. So a lot of people will see, oh no, a large snail with that ice cream cone shell. I report it. But it just note the difference that there is a pinkish coloration and the rosy wolf snail might have some striping. There will always be striping on the African snail. So if you ever see a large snail with striping, please report it to us. The next sentinel pest that you can report is the Japanese climbing fern. It is throughout your area as well. This is one of those we're really behind the ball on it because it was cultivated in Florida as long ago as 1888. By 1903, it was naturalized in Georgia because it did what plants do. It got out. It started growing in natural areas. This is a species that is prohibited for sale in Texas. So we definitely want you to report anywhere that's selling this, but we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. So its harm is that it covers shrubs and it can cover up tall trees. Its rhizome allows it to grow in dense mats. These mats can get 10 feet thick. So not only can it grow stories high, it can also create mats that are 10 feet thick. It intensifies fire called ladder fuel is basically what it's creating, and so it can make wildfires get out of hand. It imbalances it to where the fire reaches the canopy of the trees, which will destroy them, when normal natural wildfires are more about clearing the underbrush. So it is a vine-like perennial. It does lose its leaves in the winter, and it will start growing. Right now, you're gonna see some leaves that have these finger-like projections on there, and you might notice a lighter coloration at the end. Those are reproductive spores at the end. So it is a fern. It reproduces by spores. So it's going to be really hard to try to remove this and not knock any spores around, but the best thing that you can do is when you're prepared to remove this, to have trash bags to throw the refuse away, throw the plant away in it, so that you can limit any other spores. A way that you're able to identify it is that it has completely different looking leaves. That sounds silly, but you've got some leaves that are condensed. I joke that it kind of looks like it's giving you the bird. So you've got these leaves, and then you've also got these very fern-like leaves that are more lacy in appearance, but the doubly compound ones are usually about 3 to 6 inches long, 3 inches wide. So not only does this spread by rhizomes, but it also has those reproductive spores at the end, and it can crawl up pine trees that are almost 100 feet tall. When it's just blooming, it will be a light green and the leaflets will be very small when it's first emerging. But it's diverse appearance. So it will also can have an orange vine going through it. So, but the diverse fern-like appearance of the leaves will help you identify it as well. So if you see this, we do want you to remove it, but removing it would involve having a trash bag and properly disposing of it. So this next invasive species is quite small. This is one of those tiny but mighty sons of guns that I have to talk about and deal with, and we have to look out for. So this is the red bay ambrosia beetle. This is one of those hitchhikers that just caught a ride because we like to move goods back and forth. So it's thought to have arrived possibly in a solid wood packing material, so it might not have even been on plants being imported. But it is a pest to several different species that are used in agricultural settings. So it initially was detected in Georgia in 2002, where this map starts right here, and every county around it, you'll see this color coding here. Basically, this is just showing its spread and how it spread each year since its first detection. The Forest Service has been helping track it, and we were able to assist in that project for several years. And it was recorded in Harris County in November of 2022. So it is encroaching in the area as well. So the red bay ambrosia beetle not only is not only a pest, but it can also transmit a disease. So tracking it and identifying it is really important. All of the green dots are host plants, and then all of the shaded counties are the counties that have been reported. And so Jasper and Hardin was where it was first reported. We assisted with the reporting of Tyler, Angelina, Polk, and Sabine counties as well. And then it was found in Harris County in 2022, and then back up in Harrison County. So its probability of being in Montgomery, Walker, and Liberty counties are quite high. Its host trees are red bay, avocado, and sassafras. So sassafras is really prominent throughout our natural forested areas. And then pond spice, red bay, and avocado are often used and bay laurel is thought to be susceptible as well. Those are often used in spices. And then avocado itself is a major cash crop. So Mexico is very concerned about the spread of this pest disease complex, because this complex has the red bay ambrosia beetle and the disease it spread has reached California and impacted avocado crops. So the problem with identifying this pest is it's small. So I'm not going to expect you to send me a picture of this beetle. I mean, this is a penny. It is like twice the length of President Lincoln's nose. So there is a way to tell the difference, but it is quite small. So we don't expect you to necessarily know that, but if you want to know, so back here, this is actually the funnel traps that we set up to help collect that. But if you ever have a tiny beetle and you have a microscope with great objectives, there is a way to distinguish it. So we are able to quickly determine which species this is because of its overall appearance, but it has this slope on the back and then this crease. They call it a noticeable crease along the declivity. The declivity is that booty slope that's happening back there. So the red bay ambrosia beetle can spread laurel wilt. This is a fatal plant pathogen. And so you may not be able to report to me about a tiny beetle, but you might notice. And so it is important for you to watch any of your sassafras, pond spice, red bay, and avocado trees for any of these symptoms because oftentimes once the tree has laurel wilt, it does need to be destroyed. You can't really reverse the pathogen. You can reverse the beetle, but you can't reverse the pathogen. So look at those trees and see if there's any leaf wilting or color change, especially if it's happening from the top down. If you see sawdust tubes sticking out, so these will be tiny little sawdust tubes, but this will be a for sure sign that you have bark beetles. And if you're seeing these on your laurel trees, again, your red bay, your avocado, your pond spice, or your sassafras, that means you could have red bay ambrosia beetle. So you do need to look and see if you have the fungal infection, because if you do, the tree does need to be chopped down and destroyed. The way you can determine if it has the fungal infection is the wood discolored? Chop off a branch. Do you see a ring around it? That is the fungus. That means that it is spread throughout the tree, and the tree must be destroyed quickly after. If you are in an area where you can burn, we do recommend burning, but if you are just able to chop it down, if you're not able to mulch it or burn it, then we would ask you to chop it up and bag it and throw it away. And I know that seems kind of like, wow, really? But I understand that mulching and chopping trees is very expensive. So at least if you bag up the remains, that beetle cannot spread and the fungus can't spread. So the emerald ash borer, who we talked a little bit about earlier, this is one of the most infamous examples of an invasive species for the United States. And this is one that was accidentally introduced because it was burrowing in wood pallets made of ash trees. So its host tree is any type of ash. So anything in the Fraxinus genus. So not your prickly ash, but your Texas ash, green ash, white ash, the mountain ash, if it starts with Fraxinus in the scientific name, it is susceptible to this beetle. It was able to spread throughout the United States because of firewood and infested nursery stock. It was reported in Texas first in 2016, and it had somewhat of a slow spread where it jumped over to the Tarrant County, so the Fort Worth and Dallas areas in 2021, and then it started spreading around that in 2022, and then unfortunately in 24, last year, there was a significant jump. So all of the purple counties now filling in the area: Bosque, Collin, Ellis, Franklin, Grayson, Hill, Hood, Johnson, Lamar, McLennan, Red River, and Palo Pinto. All of those were then able to find the emerald ash borer. So that means now it is found as far south as Waco. So it is jumped. It is moving along, unfortunately. So the way that this beetle is able to spread has a lot to do with its life cycle. The way that it got here was there was a pupa stage. So the pupa stage is adults emerge from the trees. They make these D-shaped exit holes because, oh, Too far back. Almost. Oh, I was so close. Bow, bow, bow. They make these D-shaped exit holes because they have flat backs. So that could be a sign that you're having issues in your ash tree. So the adults emerge, they lay eggs on the bark. The eggs turn into larvae. The larvae then embed into the tree and they start chewing through the bark, and they can disrupt the xylem and the phloem, and that constricts the tree in its ability to supply nutrients, and that's how it can cause tree death. Along the winter months is when the larva will become a pupa. We think of pupa, if you think about a cocoon for a caterpillar, beetles do it too. It's just called a pupa. It's not nearly as fun to look at as a cocoon. The pupa will remain that way until the next spring when then it will emerge as an adult, and then those adults can fly to a new tree or stay in the tree that they're in. And emerald ash borers have been documented to fly a couple miles a day, so they are very mobile insects. So this beetle is much larger than the red bay ambrosia beetle, but you still may not be able to see it. So these are signs and symptoms that you need to be aware for in your ash tree. Is the tree dying from the top down? So that similar canopy dieback that we talked about with laurel wilt. So you'll notice it's dying from the top down. You might notice that it's trying to regrow. The reason that it's trying to regrow is nutrients aren't reaching the top anymore because the larvae have disrupted the circulatory system of the tree. So it's trying again to regrow. You're going to have these D-shaped exit holes. They are not large insect holes. I mean, we're talking maybe a quarter of an inch is what you're looking for. And then at this point, if your tree is losing bark, it needs to be destroyed. Like there is no more tree left to be saved. Like that is it exposing its circulatory system at this point. And so there's no way. Just like we wouldn't survive if our circulatory system was on the outside, neither do trees. So it's important again that this tree would need to be um chopped and mulched. It is really important to take the time to try to mulch this because, again, we need the beetle to not be able to spread further. Again, if you're not able to do that, then if you have the wood pile, at least spraying it with some form of pesticide might help. To then, again, we're trying to kill the bugs inside the tree. If the tree is already dead and you're not able to mulch it, consider doing that and consider just being able to bag it. But I know a ash tree is going to be much larger than an avocado tree. So I understand that's quite the undertaking, but we have to be vigilant. So distinguishing emerald ash borers from native species. So we do have native species that do resemble this species, but there is one very easy way to tell the difference. So here we've got a penny again. You'll notice the emerald ash borer is much larger than the red bay ambrosia beetle, but is still small, but it is a bright metallic green beetle. I call it a Christmas beetle because on the underside, it is like this reddish purplish color. So the underside, the abdomen is a completely different color than the elytra or the hard wings on the outside. Those wings on the outside are green and the abdomen is red. So that's going to be a really important difference to notice because that means you do have an emerald ash borer. There are native species. Again, we even have native agrilis, so they're even congeners in the same genus. But just like this Agrilis barbari, you see how it's this golden green? Its abdomen will be the exact same color as the outside. So the fact that the emerald ash borer has these two different colors is a way that you can be absolutely certain. And also, realizing what tree are you looking at, because all of these other Gryllus species, their host trees are not ash trees. So if you're seeing a bullet-shaped green metallic beetle on your ash trees and your ash trees are not looking so hot, it's really important to call an arborist because you can do tree, again, it's not going to be cheap, but you can do tree injections to kill the beetles if the tree still has a chance. So another one of these pests, this is one that we're behind the ball because it's inconspicuous. the Asian jumping beetle or the Asian jumping worm in the genus Amenthus. So there are over 400 species in the Amenthus genus. So I am not even going to try to tell you which species we're looking out for because it's really like the genus overall is problematic. And I'll point that out shortly. But you might have heard of snake worms or crazy worms or Alabama jumpers. And so these are earthworm, or these are worms that were hitchhikers in imported potted plants. So they are soil dwelling organisms, and that means that they were accidentally introduced. They were first reported in the Northeast United States around 1910, just a different type of what they thought was earthworm. And now it's been invading southwards. There's been a lot of education and outreach from Minnesota and Wisconsin about this stuff because their natural forests have been significantly impacted by the invasive and naturalized earthworms. So it is really important to have a slight PSA here that there are no earthworms native to North America. Earthworms were extinct as of the last ice age. So any worms that we find in the soil now have been brought here by humans. The colonists in particular brought over the European earthworm. Now we know the European earthworm to be great for being a nutrient cycler, and it's great in our agricultural and our garden settings, but that's where it needs to be kept. So why is this Asian jumping worm worse than a European earthworm? Again, the European earthworm provides some benefit. So we might say naturalized, but the thing is that no forest needs any kind of worm here in North America. So even our European earthworms can cause problems. So again, please just keep them in garden or agricultural settings. But the reason that we're calling this one outright invasive is because they consume all organic matter. They completely remove all nutrients and they degrade topsoil. They inhibit seed germination and they mature twice as fast as European earthworms. So, a first sign that you might have a jumping worm problem is, do you have an area of your yard where just plants never seem to grow and the soil always seems dry? And it kind of looks like this. It has like this coffee ground appearance. Well, that could mean that you have jumping worms underneath because these worms take all the nutrients for themselves. So then you're left with desiccated soil, soil that's so dry that plants will uproot because there's no nutrients, there's no moisture left. And honestly, a lot of these circular things you're seeing here are worm casings. So just worm poo and eggs is all that's here in the dirt in the end, is a lot of worm poo, and it's not even the kind that the European earthworms do. So it's really important to look at your soil after the rain. I don't know if it's raining for y'all. I'm up here in Conroe, but it just started raining for us. But also, there are physical differences. The problem with this species is that we didn't know any better, right? So I went to a seminar about this maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and I thought, huh, I wonder if these are like the worms that I'm seeing in my backyard, because I swear I've seen some that just, they're not acting right. They seem different. And it ends up, sure enough, and I put out a species page at the end, it was December 2000. Oh gosh, I think it was just in 23. But within like 3 months, I got reports from Houston, Austin, Dallas, and the Corpus areas, pretty much confirming that this worm is throughout the state. We just didn't know any better. But there is a way to tell the difference. The hardest part is going to be actually separating the good from the bad in your yard. So the way you tell the difference comes down to behavior and appearance. So first, that soil is going to look wrong, and then you're going to look at the worm, and everything about the worm is going to seem wrong. It's going to be dry and smooth. It's going to almost seem sleek. It's almost going to seem a little bit firmer. It's not going to be all floppy and curly Q like you expect of a European earthworm. And then it's called a jumping worm because it's known to thrash around. So it's known to thrash around like an angry snake. And that is where it can get its name from. But also, what if you get a lazy one? So maybe that behavior won't be a sign for you. But you can also look at the clitellum. So this is a structure on earthworms that helps with identification. It has something to do with their reproduction. I'm a tapeworm kind of person, not an earthworm kind of person. I'm like your inside worm person, not outside. So I don't know exactly what a clitellum does, but I know we can use it to help us with identification. So with our European earthworm, the clitellum, this is our European earthworm right here. This is our Asian jumping worm across it. So the clitellum on the European earthworm is like a saddle. So think about where a saddle sits on a horse. It's in the middle of the body and it's raised above the horse. So that's how the clitellum sits on a European earthworm. It's going to be raised and sitting more mid-body. For the jumping worm species right here, their clitellum is more like a collar. So it is flush with the skin and it's closer to the head. And oftentimes it is white, but as you can see in this picture here, sometimes the worm is full of dirt, so that clitellum might not be as white, but you'll notice that it's flush and closer to the head. And again, the texture will seem off. It will be more sleek versus floppy and things like that. So those were species that you can report on our website that we strongly encourage you to go to our website and report. And now these are just local invasive plants and pests in your area. So there is a noxious invasive plant and pest list. So this is a list that talks about prohibited species. There are actually prohibited species for sale. Please check our website before any purchase, but definitely please report to me. This is my personal email right here, arm001@shsu.edu. We do want you to report any nurseries that are selling any of the species listed on the noxious and invasive plant list because those are prohibited for sale. Sometimes nurseries do actually try to do that. So our noxious plants and our invasive plants, like this is it. This is the list. So you've got things like China berry, Chinese tallow, Japanese climbing fern, purple loosestrife, water hyacinth, Brazilian pepper tree. So there's quite a few species in here, some that we know to be invasive, like kudzu and giant salvinia, but other ones that were widely used in the ornamental industry. So the first one of those is very, very common in your area. You've probably seen a million today alone, and that's the tallow tree. So it is native to China, and it was brought to the United States in the 1700s. People like to say that it's Ben Franklin's tree. It easily could be. Maybe he was the one that wanted to bring it over. There was supposed to be this huge tallow soap industry happening and tallow seed oil production, and that never came to fruition, and now we are left with billions of tallow trees that have spread from the Virginia area down here through Texas. So it is found throughout the southeastern United States. It does like riparian areas, but it's very hardy. You can find it almost anywhere. So what makes it invasive is it has these allelopathic effects. Basically, it changes the soil to its benefit, to where other tallow trees can grow. So native plants and grasses, they're not able to grow in the soil anymore, and tallow trees are able to produce. They also produce hundreds of seeds a year that can last up to 5 years in the soil. So they have a very significant seed bank. So say you chop the tree down, well, there's hundreds of seeds waiting for their chance. And then if you just cut it down, it's going to resprout. Heck, if you leave the tree on the ground, it will start growing from the tree you left on the ground. It is a very, very hardy species. So it is easy to identify. It's able to identify by its kite-shaped leaves. So these almost heart-like, but really more of a kite shape. They're the tip tapers to a point, and these are the ones that have they change colors in the fall. So they can be easily spotted in the fall because those will be, oh, what beautiful magenta leaves. And that's probably what allowed it to be so widely spread as well, is because it does have beautiful foliage. Right now, you'll probably be seeing catkins out or the start of seeds forming, these green globular seeds, then become hard and black seeds with tannin coverings. So those really hard coverings are full of tannins. And those tannins, when they fall in, so when these seed coverings fall into water, they're actually also changing the pH water. And so tallow tree has started to been documented to contribute to the decline of frog species. So when there's tallow seeds and their shells are falling into the water and changing the pH, the tadpoles aren't able to properly go under metamorphosis, and so they're not turning into adults, or the eggs aren't even hatching. So tallow trees have a lot of effects, not just with plant life, but have a lot of effects on aquatic life as well. And even if there weren't frogs in there, the tannin input on those water bodies is can be significant, especially if you think about like these smaller ponds and things like that. Air potato, this is one of the species that the Woodlands Task Force does deal with directly and quite vigorously, which I appreciate. And this is in the yam family. So it's called air potato because it creates basically these air tubers. It's easy to identify because of these giant heart-shaped leaves. These leaves are about 8 inches long, and they are heart-shaped with the veins beginning in the center and meeting and going outwards. There are native lookalikes. So there is a native squash. Notice it's Dioscorea villosa, and our invasive one is Dioscorea bulbifera. Well, villosa, it has the same ginormous leaves, but no potato, no air potato. And also, you'll notice it won't grow as quickly. So that might be something you need to scope out for maybe a few. Now that you're looking at it, you need to see, is that an air potato? Because I know I noticed a couple years ago I had a heart-shaped vine growing in. I have a natural area in the back of my yard, and I thought, oh no, but a potato never came. And then also the vine tends to stay in its area. So between its behavior and lack of air potato, I know that I'm dealing with the native squash. And then at first glance, a greenbrier might look like a small air potato, but in the end, greenbriers have um thorns on their stems, on the vines, I mean. And also the leaves are much smaller, where they're only about 2 or 3 inches in length. So those air potatoes are going to be a for sure sign that you have them. And so you want to make sure that when you're removing this again, you're going to be bagging up the plants because you don't want to leave the air potatoes around. And those can get up to 6 inches in diameter. So they can become quite large. And this is an infestation of air potatoes. So it is able to climb tens of feet, just like the Japanese climbing fern. So again, it's a very hardy vine. Deep-rooted sedge is a sedge that has deep roots. I know that sounds silly, but that's really what it is, and that's why it can be so problematic, is that deep root. Its roots can go very deep, but it also spreads by rhizomes. So things that spread by rhizomes mean that usually it just requires a little bit of plant to go a long way, to take root, to start a whole other scenario, to start a whole other plant. And so when I first took over texasinvasives.org, I am not much of a plant person. I have become, I mean, I've always liked plants. I appreciate plants. I thank trees every day for oxygen. It's just I was always the parasite, insect, animal, invasive person. And I remember my predecessor talking about sedges have edges. And I'm like, well, don't most things have edges? But then I actually felt a sedge and I thought, oh my goodness, this is brilliant. Sedges have edges, and sage plants have square bases, square stems, but sedges have triangular stems. And so that's why they say sedges have edges. And the terminal flowers, those are just those green little spikelets. Oftentimes you'll see this growing in a lot of fields, prairies, but also even in your yard. Maybe you have this plant and you keep trying to get it out. It just might require a little bit more grit than you're used to. The hammerhead flatworm, this is one that is in our area and it is quite widespread. It's considered, so this is also one that it's just more recently we started calling it invasive. No way to beat around it. Tissy started calling it invasive about 10 years ago because we realized it's a predator of earthworms. And I know I just said that no earthworms are native, blah 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 blah. But earthworms, again, in a proper setting, like an agricultural garden setting where they're used for compost, like that is a wonderful thing. So we don't need predators of earthworms running around messing up compost piles. So that's also where you will find these things. They also are flatworms, so they squeeze into weird places. You might find them stuck to your dog's leg because they're sticky, and you might find them in the shower, but that does not mean that your shower is infested. It's just they're flatworms. They have no cuticles, so they can literally squeeze into anywhere and get into really weird places. And this one catches headlines a lot because it's known to secrete a neurotoxin. But it's really important to note that this neurotoxin is to immobilize earthworms. It causes almost no problem with humans. I've gotten thousands of reports and I've known 3 people to have reactions, and only one of them required a steroid cream because they had like a poison ivy like reaction. So again, nothing that affected their brain. It's just that neurotoxin is to help them immobilize earthworms. So much like the Asian jumping worm, it hitchhiked in potted plants. It was first found in a greenhouse in Pennsylvania in 1901, and then it spread by potted plants. It's present throughout the southeastern United States. We thought it was native. We have anecdotes, so basically people reporting to us that they have seen these since the 1980s. So we know that this species has been in our area at least since the 1980s. And and then with a lot of the recent press that happened over the past few years, we were able to get even more reports confirming that it is very widespread throughout Texas, primarily in the slightly more humid areas, so not really far west past Kerrville, not too much past Wichita Falls, and then all the way down to the valley. So really that, eastern 2/3 of the state, this flatworm is present. So this is one of our final critters that we'll be talking about, and this has the strategies on how to prevent that parasite I briefly talked about earlier. So the black velvet leatherleaf slug. This is a slug that is black, and it has a velvet-like appearance. So instead of being really slimy, it's going to look matte black. It's almost going to look like it is made of velvet, and it's a very easy to identify species. So this is one of the ones that Tissy, we directly called out to citizens, please tell us where this slug is, because we first knew it to be in the San Antonio area, which wasn't too surprising. So initially in the United States, it was found in Mobile, Alabama. But Texas has like a slightly different history with this slug because we knew it to be native to South America and then it moved its way up through Central America, like through Mexico. So there had been reports in the valley, which that wasn't very surprising. It's not like animals know human country boundaries, right? And then there had been some reports in Bexar County. Okay, well, that's kind of a reasonable jump, right? There's so many highways that connect the valley to San Antonio. But then one of my colleagues at Lamar State in Orange County noticed it, and we realized, wait a minute, Orange County, Bexar County? Like, wait a minute, that's a really large jump and significantly different areas, ecoregions. You know what? This is such a unique looking organism. There is nothing native that looks like this. Why don't we put out a call to citizens? And citizens were able to help fill in this distribution map where it's documented now in over 50 country counties. And the reason we wanted to bring this species up as an invasive and then highlight it to citizens is it does pose the same risk that apple snails and giant African snails pose, which is they're able to transmit parasites. So really it comes down to just being educated about it to help with prevention. The parasite is preventable. Even the one that the apple snail, all these carry the same type of Angiostrongylus nematodes. These nematodes, in the end, they're looking for rats, but they can infect humans. It is preventable as long as you don't get the parasite in your mouth. How do you not get the parasite in your mouth? You wash your hands before touching your mouth, especially if you've touched something gross like a slug. You do not keep, please, just as a parasitologist, do not get me wrong, snails and slugs are very, very cool. They are used in hundreds of parasite life cycles. So just for your sake, don't keep slugs and snails as pets. And then if you do notice snails and slugs in your garden, please wash any fruits or veggies that you're about to eat from your garden. And really, a warm water rinse or even a little bit of vegetable soap, like that will go a very, very long way. This parasite is completely preventable. It's just something that we're not used to being at risk for in the United States. So education is really key. And if you see this black slug, please have it removed. If you have any young children like I do or grandchildren, please let them know, hey, if you see a black slug, come find an adult, right? Because we don't want them touching it and then touching their mouths, right? The slug itself is not a parasite, but we can't tell if it's infected. So to reduce any chance of that, please, please follow those steps. And the final initiative that I'll talk to you about before we get into how you report things is to please save your citrus. So the Asian citrus psyllid or Diaphorina citrii is native to Southeast Asia, and it was first detected in Florida in 1998. Right here we have a picture of an adult, and it is a small insect, but I like to think of it as it's a little bit snooty because it always keeps its butt up in the air. So that's something to kind of keep in mind if you see any pests on your citrus plants. And then here are the larvae with these waxy secretions. So if you do any gardening and maybe you've had aphids, and aphids, they secrete something called honeydew, which is basically like carb liquid. And it's stuff that ants feed off of, and a lot of other organisms feed off of this. Well, Asian citrus psyllid, it produces their larvae produce these white waxy secretions, which can actually help you identify the pest on your citrus plant. So it alone is a pest of citrus trees, but it does not cause much damage. The damage that it is able to inflict is its ability to spread the plant pathogen citrus greening. So citrus greening is another one of those fatal pathogens, just like laurel wilt, but this one also impacts us economically because it's destroying the fruit well before the tree dies. So, this is why you might have seen citrus quarantine signs, especially if you drive from Montgomery to Walker County. You'll see signs about you're now leaving a citrus quarantine. Please don't move your citrus. It is directly related to this pest. And disease complex. And that is because unlike the emerald ash borer, unlike even the red bay ambrosia beetle, this pest does not fly well. It does not fly well at all. So the spread of this pest has been directly linked to humans moving infested plants. So that's why a quarantine has been put in effect to help reduce the spread of the plant disease citrus greening. So the original quarantine started down here in Rio Grande Valley when it was first reported in San Juan. That's also where our ruby red grapefruit production happens. So any citrus tree is susceptible to this. So again, if the tree has citrus in its scientific name, it is susceptible. Your lemons, your limes, your key limes, your kumquats, your nectarines, your navel oranges, your grapefruits. I mean, if it is a citrus, it is susceptible to this disease and this pest. So it initially started in the Rio Grande Valley, but there is a citrus quarantine in our area here. What this means is that if you live. So I live in Montgomery County. I can buy citrus anywhere inside the quarantine. What I cannot do is go up to where I work in Huntsville, is go to Walker County, buy a lemon tree, and bring it back into the quarantine area. But what I certainly shouldn't be doing is buying anything or taking anything from inside the quarantine area and moving it outwards. So most citrus plants that are sold in these quarantine areas, they are screened by the Texas Department of Ag to make sure that they don't have citrus greening. But just because it doesn't have it when it's being sold, the disease is around in the environment. Other psyllids are around, so you could bring it home and then it could get infested with the psyllids and then contract citrus greening. So you definitely don't want to be moving any citrus outside of these quarantine areas. So don't want to you're going to have to leave your lemon plant if you're going, getting a new job in Austin or a new job in San Antonio, because we shouldn't be moving it out of those areas. So the Asian citrus psyllid, it's kind of right about now is when it'll be most active, but definitely where there are periods of new citrus growth, the eggs will be laid and then the nymphs will be completely exposed. So right here is a picture of adults and nymphs, and the nymphs are what we call the larva, and those white waxy secretions you see, that is actually visible to the naked eye. So it'll kind of look like your plant needs dusting. You'll be like, it's not a fake plant. Why does it look like it needs dusting? That's the white waxy excretions. And then here are all the adults with their butts up in the air. So if you see eggs and nymphs and white waxy excretions and adults on the underside of your citrus leaves, please, please contact us. That's too fast. Signs that signs that your tree is infested with citrus greening and not just the citrus psyllid. There are several signs, but it is important to note that there are other like nutrient deficiencies, like if your plant's been overwatered or if it's low in nitrogen, those can cause other effects that look like citrus greening. Um, but if your fruit production is being impacted, that is a for sure way to confirm that you have citrus greening problems. So most trees will die within a few years. It will start with their leaves losing their chlorophyll. So they're losing their greening. The tree will not be growing. The fruit size will be reduced. It'll drop early. It'll be asymmetrical. It'll be sour. It'll be full of seeds. It will not be viable for consumption, or, I mean, it won't be suitable for sale or juice. So that's where it has a significant economic impact. You could eat it. It's not like it's poison, but it's going to be a very unpleasant dining experience if you try to eat this fruit. So we do offer citrus screening and psyllid detection. So please contact me if you have any citrus trees that you would like us to set up a trap or take a sample to do some starch testing to see if you might have citrus screening. We do have funding from USDA APHIS for this specifically. Or if you know a group of other people that own a bunch of citrus trees and you'd like me to talk about citrus diseases, particularly, I can do that. I can talk about that for as long or as little as you want. So please, again, contact me at ARM001 at shsu.edu. We can provide these yellow sticky traps that we stick up for a couple weeks. We take them back, we look at them for the pests. And then if you have the pests, we can try to connect you with ways to mitigate the pests. And then also we can see if citrus screening testing would need to happen. So managing invasive plants. Managing invasive pests often has a lot to do with removal, which we'll touch on, but invasive plants, again, that will have a lot to do with removal, but it's going to have a lot to do with this last part of the monitor, retreat, and maintain. There's going to be a lot of that happening. Best management practices. So we really want you to treat early, treat often. An integrated approach is probably going to be what you're using, which means you're going to use more than just mechanical or chemical. You might be using both mechanical and chemical, or biological and mechanical, to help take down this invasive plant. Please remember with chemicals that maybe a license is required. Wear protective gear and beware of drift. And some of the examples, I'll show you ways that you can watch the drift when you're applying. You're going to want to monitor those seed banks, right? The tallow tree, seeds last up to 5 years. That is not the only invasive tree that acts like that. And then you want to plant something in its place. So definitely planting natives. So mechanical is really removal, right? Hand pulling is awesome, especially if they're just little saplings. Weed wrenching might be more appropriate if it's a larger or hardier or more rooted plant that you're trying to get out, but it's not quite a tree. Consistent mowing and grazing can be very effective, but it's important to look at our website to see if that might make them grow faster. Certain invasive plants love to be mowed. It helps them grow so much faster. So that's something to look into, making sure that you're not allowing it to spread quicker. Prescribed fire is brilliant. I know it's not feasible in the Woodlands area, but if you have property in other areas and you're trying to manage a bunch of different invasive plants, prescribed fire is very, very effective. Tree girdling is a great non-chemical approach to trying to um, remove large stands of trees. So say maybe you don't have the area where you can chop down these trees at the time, or maybe getting access for that kind of equipment could be harder. Tree girdling would be a great alternative to that, to where you expose the phloem using a bark remover, and basically you're acting like those bark beetles I was talking about earlier. You're exposing the tree's phloem and xylem, so you're causing it to desiccate and die, and then you can remove it later. With Cliff Tylick here on YouTube, he is a master naturalist, and he's removed multiple acres of privet in the Austin area just with tree girdling. So it's really important to not go too deep. You're just carving to that inner bark right there. So really just carving the outside. And that's because you want to interrupt this the nutrient circulation. If you go too deep, it can kind of almost make it slower. So if you just remove that outer bark to expose the inner bark, you can get it to remove, but also it's really effective. No regrowth happens. So, like I had been talking about with the emerald ash borer, where the ash trees were trying to do those epicormic shoots, like they're trying to regrow, they're trying to do this. This is almost like a slower exposure to where the tree doesn't know, so the tree doesn't try to re-sprout like crazy.
So we may have lost Ashley for a minute. I don't know where you are, but I'm hearing some thunder. I don't know if she had a lightning strike or what. Let's give her just a minute. Sorry, I look like I'm in the dark. I'd been so engrossed in the program, I hadn't gotten up and turned on a light. While we wait, there was a question in the chat that I think might be worth discussing for a minute. Someone, when Ashley was talking about hydrilla, asked about Lake Conroe, where carp were introduced to help control the hydrilla, and wondering had that been successful. Um, if you, oops, there she is.
Sorry about that. My laptop died. My charger wasn't plugged in. So,
Okay, let me make you co-host so you can share again.
yes. All right. Here we go. Get back up there. I was like, no, I thought I had more time. Okay. So tree girdling, it's really important not to carve too deep, but it is really, really effective and it doesn't cause any regrowth. Um, and it's effective a lot on privet and tallow. Chemical, it's always important to follow labels and directions. Be selective. So definitely, don't always resort to this, but oftentimes when you're dealing with invasive plants, chemical treatment usually gets involved. My favorite method is the cut and treat, and this is really good, especially if you have like lone standing trees or teams of people as well, because the important part about cut and treat is you're cutting the tree and then you are immediately placing herbicide on the stump. I like to use a paintbrush. It just creates a very focused application. So you're not just all willy-nilly with chemicals. And then you can add a little dye to the herbicide as well. So then you can see if it's been thoroughly painted. So the reason it's important to apply the herbicide right after you cut it is because just like if we get a paper cut on our hand, right, in a couple hours it starts, healing over by the next day, and maybe it's not even that bad, and a couple days later it's gone. Trees are the same way. You cause an abrasion and they're going to try to start healing over. So if you cut a tree and then you do herbicide the next day, it's really not going to be as effective. So I always recommend having one person cut and one person at least applying the herbicide. And if you have more teams, more people, then you just make sure you have half the team is painters and half the team are loppers. Direct foliar spray, this is really effective and good if you are not able to cut the tree down in any sense. But this is the one that you definitely don't want to be applying any herbicides right now, right? We are in the middle of spring. Pollinators are everywhere. So if you are spraying chemicals on flowers, that will harm the pollinators. So that's something that we're not going to be doing right now, but it's a great idea in the fall. And then if you are going to use foliar spray, I always like to use something like a milk jug, a milk gallon. You just cut the end off, but it helps focus it. Because if you've ever used those herbicide sprays, it's very wide fan. So the gallon on top helps focus the spray, making it a more concentrated effort versus it spraying everywhere. And then you've got the basal spray. So this is where we spray herbicide to the base of the tree. This is good on younger trees. Usually when it's older and it has the rougher bark, it will not absorb the herbicide. So that's where if it's an older tree, you might need to do the next thing we'll talk about where you might need to either do a cut and treat, foliar spray, or a hack and squirt. Hack and squirt is a little bit of both. It's kind of like a cut and treat, but you're not fully cutting down the tree. So it's exactly what the name suggests. You take a little hatchet and you are hacking marks around the base of the tree, and then you are squirting in the herbicide. So it's a little bit of that mechanical cutting, and then you are putting the herbicide in. Again, because this is really good to control larger trees, and you tend to use water-based herbicides for this. But again, this is not something you want to be doing now. Well, now this hack and squirt, they've done studies to suggest that the herbicide may not affect the nectar of flowers if you're applying it in this sense, but it's one of those where it's different for every tree, so the herbicide could influence the nectar. So just for the sake of pollinators, you don't want to do this during the spring. And for any of these chemical treatments, you do not want to do it on a day like today when you know it's going to rain, right? Because you don't want to apply this stuff and then it's instantly washed out and affecting other plant life. And then once you've chopped everything down, you need to put something in its place. So definitely have a rake, scrape up any seeds, bag up any seeds that you can of those invasive plants, and then put something in its place. Because what do they say? Nature abhors a vacuum, and those invasive species are going to fill the vacuum very quickly. So just please put something in its place. To prevent a lot of the invasive pests, think about planting natives. Sometimes it's not. Maybe the plant itself, we might list it as invasive, but let's say in a landscaping industry, it's not considered that invasive, or it's no kudzu or it's no privet, right? It stays in its place, but sometimes you might need to think about what is that plant bringing with us? An invasive species like the spotted lanternfly, it's from a certain area in Asia where also the tree of heaven is from. And so now that tree of heaven is found throughout the southeastern United States because it was used as an ornamental, the spotted lanternfly has some of its native habitat growing right here in the United States, right? So sometimes it could be the plant itself might attract the wrong kind of company. So that's another reason why you should be planting natives. If you have a tree that's been destroyed by any kind of bark beetle, so native or invasive, right? If the tree has died from beetles, you need to remove that tree ASAP as best you can. It may be that it's getting chopped off and taken to the landfill. Maybe that's the best that you can do, but if just please, if you can only get it chopped and removed, to just grab some pesticide, any kind of pesticide, and spray those logs before they're taken off to the landfill. If you are able to mulch, please mulch. And if you're able to do any kind of mixture of that and bag things too, please bag them. Do not keep it for firewood. Do not share it with neighbors. This is literally how so many insects are spread. So many, including our emerald ash borer, the red bay ambrosia beetle, the South American palm weevils, and the Asian longhorn beetle and the Asian citrus psyllid, right? So these were all of the sentinel pests that I talked to you about today. These are the species that if you go to our website, you can report to us right away about them. So the apple snail, Japanese climbing fern, African snail, emerald ash borer, red bay ambrosia beetle, Asian jumping worm, citrus greening disease, and the Asian citrus psyllid. All but one of those are here in Texas. And then these were all of the invasive species I talked to you about today. So we added in a few of like the Chinese tallow, the Arab potato, the hammerhead flatworm, and the black velvet leatherleaf slug. And to just kind of give you an idea of, so this is that sentinel pest list, and these were the species that we spoke about today that we really want you to keep an eye out for. Any other species I didn't talk about but is on this list, please report to us. So submitting reports on texasinvasives.org. Now, especially in the days of iNaturalist and things like that, I get asked, well, why should I report directly to texasinvasives.org? And the reason is that we have direct connections with our federal and state partners. So like Parks and Wildlife, A&M Forest Service, USDA APHIS, and the U.S. Forest Service, we have direct connections. So we can kind of hurry up and send that flare, and they will see us send the flare and come provide help. So it basically, that doesn't mean that now, a lot of these entities, they have iNaturalist set up with certain terms that they're searching for and things, keywords that will pop up. But it's just if you're directly reporting to us, again, we have these established connections. We can help get it up the flagpole a lot faster and alert them as soon as possible because an early response is really the best way to get ahead of some of these newly emerging invasive species. So to report any of those sentinel pests, you just go to texasinvasives.org and click on the species that you're trying to report, or you can go to the take action. So if you don't like the way it's set up on the home page, you can go to take action and click report it, and then you can scroll up and down to report it that way, or you can use our invasives app or this QR code, or go to our link tree, or just go to texasinvasives.org. If you do go and you are filling out a report, this is how it looks. So the texasinvasives.org website, the reporting structure is older. It's one of those, we had grand designs when we took over texasinvasives.org. We thought, oh, we're going to update this and update that. But the problem is that there is a database on there that is 20 years old. That's 20 years worth of data that we can't exactly move off of that platform. So what we can do is keep adding to it. So this is the report form that appears. At minimum, we need at least an email, a location, and a picture. We'd really like the other information like your name and where you're from, but at minimum for the reporting form, an email, coordinates of the sighting, and a picture are going to be important. Please try to watch the size of your picture. I mean, again, especially the website is older, so just trying to compress any photos that you're sending to us. But if you're not sure it went through, I will provide you our other inbox email as well. But this is how you can report to us. It's a really simple form. And once you submit it, we are immediately alerted about it and then we can respond accordingly. So if you are using a reported form, just please try to keep a couple things in mind. Only one picture is submitted at a time. So try for a close up. A contrasting background would be really helpful. Something like this is fantastic, but Graham, he's an insect photographer. I don't expect this kind of quality, but just something a little bit better, more in focus than something like this. Just highlighting, identifying characteristics. So yeah, does it have berries or a flower or a stripe that we need to have in focus, just trying to keep those sorts of things in mind. Again, just keeping the picture in focus and making sure that that's what you're submitting to us would be great, because we do have to have a certain level of confidence before we're able to verify these infos. And again, you can always stay informed with our monthly iWire. So if you want to keep hearing about invasive species and the occasional successes that happen, then please sign up on our website with the Keep Informed link wherever you see that. And then also, as you're experiencing today, you are participating in a Woodlands Green Going Green sustainability lecture. So it's really fortunate that you're in an area that has a lot of engagement and interaction with the public, to where they feature things like invasive species, but they also talk about a lot of other things going on in the areas and also in the state. So forest fungi, or even talking about climate influences, but also there is an invasive species task force associated with the Woodlands Green and the township. And this task force, I mean, it genuinely makes my heart so happy. Whenever Terry and I met about 5 years ago now, once I took over Texas Invasives, I met up with Terry, and I just was so excited that somewhere close to home, right? Just being up the road at Sam Houston State, somewhere so close to home, is actively removing hundreds and hundreds of pounds of invasive plants. So not just air potato, which is one of their main culprits, they've also gotten into bamboo removal. And then because they were so active with their air potato removal, when we found out the USDA wanted to release some air potato beetles, I instantly said, hey, I know just the group. I know exactly where you can release these air potato beetles, because one, they have populations documented, and two, you've got a very active group of volunteers that can go and track the beetles as well. And so for a couple of years, they were doing biocontrol efforts, and it ends up that the air potato beetle not only eats air potato, it also eats Chinese tallow. So it's kind of a really cool thing. So I'll leave this here for a second, as this is one of those pushes, right? Scan this QR code. Are you interested in helping build a sustainable community through education and action? Then you should definitely sign up for the Invasive Species Task Force by scanning this QR code. It is a really awesome group. And again, it's just, it makes my heart happy to see people being so involved with invasive species. And I think they may not be associated with Woodlands Green, but there's an active master naturalist chapter in the area that's looking into apple snail removal stuff as well. So there is a lot of removal that can happen on a larger scale. So just to kind of wrap it up, before we open it up to questions, or just some little reminders. So any invasive species that I talked to you about today and their management, that is available at texasinvasives.org or tsusinvasives.org. Those sentinel pests that we want you to report to us, that's only through the texasinvasives.org website. Other sightings, so if you were ever not sure if your report went through, or you want to email us about other invasives or just anything in general, please send us your other sightings to invasives at shsu.edu. And then if you are interested in citrus sampling, or you want me to talk about a citrus disease workshop, please send me an email at arm001 at shsu.edu. And that is all I have. So we can open up I'll leave this slide up for a little bit before I stop sharing, just so everybody can have the information. But we can go through any questions if anybody has anything.
Yay, thank you so much. That was absolutely terrific. We really didn't have too many questions. A lot of comments thanking you and talking about how effective the presentation was and how important the topic was. So I think you've hit a really good sweet spot with this group tonight. Um, One person, when you were talking about hydrilla, did ask about Lake Conroe and when they had released carp in Lake Conroe to try to get rid of the hydrilla. And did that mean, because we don't hear much about the hydrilla, that it was successful? And I thought you might want to give us a little bit of explanation of how that really went.
They are they're keeping it managed for the most part. And the grass carp is one of those great examples of a biocontrol oopsie. So they now have to release triploid carp. So they have to release sterile carp because initially it was one of those, oh, let's bring in a predator. And then they brought the predator, and then the carp reproduce and reproduce and reproduce, and they were displacing native fish. So now and that was happening everywhere they were treating hydrilla. So now that sterile carp have been released into the lake, yeah, I think they are still introducing the carp, and it is helping keeping it a lot more manageable. It's not overrunning the lake, which is the important part. It can still support the wildlife there and the recreation, and so they've gotten a good balance with it, I'd say. But yes, that is an exact example of biocontrol for invasive species.
So I see there are some Heartwood Master Naturalists on here. Is Heartwood the Master Naturalist chapter that's working on apple snails?
I believe so. I want to say it was them. Yeah, and so they heard this talk. They heard my talk just last week. But yes, I want to say it was some Heartwood Master Naturalists that went and got some training. So the Alamo Master Naturalist chapter, there was someone who was really engaged. They got in touch with the San Antonio River Authority to say, please let me remove snails from your river walk because it becomes a whole liability issue. And so Sarah was like, okay, fine, we will train you, we'll show you how to do it. And he removed thousands of apple snails. And so I believe some master naturalists were going to go get training from the San Antonio River Authority on what to do and then kind of broach that subject with like the Woodlands area on, kind of how can we do this sort of citizen forward engagement while minimize, like people want to get out there and remove them, but there is a liability and then you have to get permission because you're usually in the property is usually owned. But yes, that was my understanding is it was some Heartwood Master Naturalists that were going to get some apple stale training on how best to remove them when you're in the water.
So I will comment that the I'm not sure whether the pond has a name, but it's the one that's off Kirkendall. I think it's called Lakeside Park. It's a fairly large pond that is um, plagued by hyacinth, water hyacinth, but also there's a seems to be a fairly large population of the apple snail there, and there's been a lot of conversation locally about when you see those big pink masses of eggs, take action to prevent their proliferation any further. So yeah, there is definitely interest locally. One of the other questions was about whether you might know whether the Woodlands Township itself is doing any tallow tree removals. I don't know that they've ever specifically targeted Chinese tallow. I don't know if you do.
I don't think so. I know when I've done like some tabling in the Woodlands area, people are talking about tallow and they're kind of looking for the township to take care of it, but I don't know if there was any initiative, like any actual funding behind that.
I don't either,
Yeah.
but there have been some volunteer groups, including some master naturalists, including some Woodlands Green member groups who have independently, just on a volunteer basis, worked in some public areas to do the tree girdling. So, and then they would let the township know where those tree locations were that had been girdled, and they'd monitor them. And when the tree appeared dead or nearly dead, then they would go cut them down and take them out. But I have not heard really anything else about a true program for Chinese tallow.
Yeah,
Uh,
I haven't, or not recently, but
other than the many thanks for the presentation, I'm not seeing any further questions in the chat, Ashley.
okay.
Um, so if you could, now that you've left this one up, if you could back up just a slide or two to where
Yes.
that I'm interested in joining the task force
Yeah.
is there. This is just to receive notifications about when work days are scheduled to do monitoring, removal. Right now, there are more than 50 sites that the Invasives Task Force is has been auditing for the past couple of months. We're just now, as Ashley told us, getting into the time of year when we start actually seeing the plants. So for the past couple of months, task force volunteers have been visiting those 50 plus sites to check on the status. Some of them are in such wonderful shape after a few years of going back to maintain year after year, season after season. Um, but the work is beginning to set up. I'm not certain, so don't hold me to this, but I think um, next Saturday, is that the first Saturday in May, whatever Saturday that is, not this coming one, but the next one. I think there's an invasives task force workday scheduled, possibly on WG Jones Forest property. But if you want to get involved, use this QR code and you'll get notifications about uh, the the dates for work. Yeah, someone said it's May 3rd. They think that it's I guess they're telling me that's the Saturday. So get in there and you'll get notified for sure if that is a firm date for some invasives work. Ashley, it was wonderful to hear from you tonight. Thank you so much for making the time for this special 2 hour Going Green lecture. It's just an amazing thing to see so many folks who've attended, and I hope learned as much as I have. Um, if you are a person, a student ambassador, a master naturalist, even though we are going to give you a 5 minute head start heading home, um, you still count 2 hours of advanced training. So thanks to everyone who was here tonight. Thank you, Ashley, again, and we look forward to seeing you soon. And congrats on that new baby.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Good
Terry.
night,
Thank you, Ashley.
everybody.
Appreciate
Yep.
it. A great presentation.
Thank you so much. Y'all have a good night.